Whether you're stateside or in Italia, Jesus, that is a horrible accent. Oh my god. Lasagna is a classic dish that's usually served at large gatherings or, for special occasions. So I gotta keep it real. Lasagna probably isn't one of those dishes that you're just sort of gonna slap together on a Monday night after work, especially if you decide to make it from scratch, which is exactly what we're going to do. That being said, lasagna is one of the most delicious and satisfying things to cook and eat, so it's worth it, I would say. There really are dozens of ways to make lasagna. There's dozens of types of lasagna. There's fillings like cheese, greens, herbs, vegetables. So according to Marcella Hazan, the author of Essentials of Italian Cooking, and really the goddess of Italian cooking, just in general, the basic anatomy of a lasagna consists of a few things. Homemade pasta sheets. She likes to use spinach pasta, but we're gonna use regular. A ragu, or just, a meat sauce of sorts. And bechamel, aka bechamel, aka just a creamy dairy-infused white sauce. The queen has spoken, and lucky for me, my lasagna isn't too far off from that. Bolognese is the name of a type of ragu from Bologna, Italy, and we are going to make it first because it takes the longest. A tradish bolognese is made with ground pork, beef, and veal. However, today I'm reaching for my homemade Italian sausage and some ground chuck. Next is the mirepoix, or 2 parts onion to 1 part celery and carrot, all diced up, and an herb sachet of fresh thyme, oregano, and bay leaf. Then some butter, minced garlic, whole milk, veal or beef stock, San Marzano tomatoes, these can be whole or pureed, either one, salt, black pepper, and some drinkable wine. Keyword drinkable. A dry red or a white is going to work fine here. I'm using Sauvignon Blanc. Before I start the sauce, I like to first shape the meat into patties, then season, then brown them in a dry Dutch oven over high heat. Forming the meat into patties creates more surface area, which in turn allows for more browning. If we were to just add all the meat in as is, it would kind of steam and we wouldn't get any of those roasty flavors generated by the Maillard reaction. Remember, brown food equals tasty food, capiche? And don't worry about cooking the patties all the way through. Once brown, just set them aside. We're going to use them later. If there's an offensive amount of leftover fat in the pan after searing the meat, just use a paper towel to blot it out. In this case, I really didn't have that much fat, so I'm going to leave it in. With the heat on medium-high, drop in 4 tablespoons or half a stick of unsalted butter, then the mirepoix, which consists of 1 large onion, 3 celery ribs, and 2 carrots, all diced up, 5 minced garlic cloves, and a pinch of salt and pepper. Give that all a nice mix and cook the vegetables down until the onions and the celery sort of look translucent. It'll take about 8 minutes. Water will release from the vegetables, which will begin to deglaze the pan. Once the veg is cooked down, finish deglazing the pan with about 1.5 cups of wine. Now we need to harvest that flavor by using a utensil to scrape the burnt bits off the bottom of the pan, then continue cooking until most of the wine's evaporated, about 10 minutes more. Once the wine is mostly gone, crumble in the meat patties from earlier. By now they should be cooled down, so don't worry. You should have a little under 2 pounds of meat. Once incorporated, use a utensil to chop up the meat just a bit more, then in with 2 cups of whole milk. Swirl that milk into the meaty veg mixture and reduce it all down until the milk is basically gone. This is going to take at least 10 minutes more, so, be patient with it. Once it looks a lot drier than earlier, in with 1 can or 28 ounces of tomato puree and 2 cups of stock. Give that all a nice swirly, and it's now time for additional aromatics, such as our herb sachet, chili flake for some kick, and Parmesan rinds. These are leftover end bits from Parmesan cheese. They're little umami bombs, totally optional, but recommended if you have them. Bring the entire thing up to a boil on high heat, then reduce to low and simmer, uncovered for 2 to 6 hours. As the bolognese simmers, it's going to reduce in volume and concentrate in flavor. Now remove the parm rinds and herb sachet. They're spent, they've done their job, and at this angle you can really see just how much the sauce is reduced. It's sunk by at least a couple inches. Yeah, its consistency is much thicker than it was at the start. A cool chefy trick that I've picked up is to use fish sauce to finish seasoning the ragu. The fish sauce amplifies the umami that the meat, tomatoes, and Parmesan rinds give off. But really, just add a dash or two. You shouldn't be able to taste the fish sauce at all. If you can taste the fish sauce, you've added too much. Because we are making lasagna, I want to thin out the ragu a bit. A stick or immersion blender is the perfect tool for the job, but a normie blender also totally works fine. Just be sure to pulse and not liquefy the sauce completely. We still want some texture. A few mid-sized clumps are totally fine. Alright, bolognese complete. Let's make some pasta. Good pasta starts with good flour. This is type 00 flour. It's finely ground, which affects the texture of the final product. It's quite common in grocery stores these days, but high quality all-purpose flour will work just fine if you cannot find 00. Start by dumping 4 cups or 510 grams of flour onto a clean surface, then use your fingers to carve out a bowl in the pile. For this recipe, we need 4 whole eggs and 5 yolks. Slide all ye eggies into the flour hole and gently whisk with a fork. Once whisked, slowly begin collapsing the inner walls of the flour bowl into the eggs and continue mixing. Slowly incorporate more and more flour until the eggs look dry enough to work by hand. Then ditch the fork and work the eggs into the flour until a homogeneous blob forms. You might need a little bit of water, that's okay, just a tiny bit of water at a time. It's winter here, so it's super dry. The drier your environment, the more liquid you're gonna need to make a good dough, so keep that in mind. Once blobified, continue kneading the dough until it begins to look shiny and smooth. I knead by pulling the bottom of the dough over the top, turning 90 degrees, then using my body weight to push it back down. Don't skimp on this step. Kneading is going to give the pasta its structure and strength. Knead for 10 minutes or so, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Once the dough has a nice shine to it, shape it into a cylinder, cover it with plastic wrap, and let it rest for 30 minutes. The resting time makes the dough more malleable and easier to work with. While the pasta dough rests, let's make the bechamel. Start by making a roux with equal parts flour and fat by weight. Add 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter and 3 tablespoons of flour to a saucepan on medium heat. The roux is going to start off pretty pale, then slowly darken. Just cook the roux until golden and it starts to smell pretty nutty, like brown butter almost. It doesn't take long, so keep an eye out, make sure it doesn't burn. A bechamel is simply a roux with added milk, so pro tip, for a smooth, sexy sauce, make sure that the milk you're adding is cold. If you add cold milk to a hot roux, it will not form any lumps. The roux is going to be at its maximum thickening potential as soon as this comes to a boil. So when you see this start to simmer and you notice the viscosity of it, that's going to be as thick as your roux is going to make the bechamel. So if it's a little runny, make a little more roux, whisk it back in. If it's a little thick, add a little more milk. Also, make sure to whisk the bechamel continuously so that it doesn't burn. Once all the milk is whisked in, dump in a cup of grated Parmigiano Reggiano, grate in a tiny bit of nutmeg, then finish with salt and pepper to taste. So, okay, technically, since we added some cheese, our bechamel has sort of transformed into what's called a Mornay sauce, just so you know, but, I'm totally not calling it that, it's a bechamel. Cool, okay, bechamel done, pop a lid on, set that aside for now, and if you need to, now's the time to rewarm the ragu that we made earlier. Just cover it and bring it up over low heat. Pasty time. Okay, so the dough has now rested long enough, let's shape it. You can kind of see it's so much more supple. What a great word, supple. Great word. Use a bench scraper or something similar to divide the dough log up into 4 equal pieces. Leave one out and just cover the rest up, set them aside. That's going to stop them from drying out. On a floured surface, use the pads of your fingers to press the piece of dough out into a 6-inch circle, something like that. And we are finally ready to start making pasta sheets. Set your pasta maker to the widest setting, which is usually 0, then feed the dough puck into the machine. After the first pass, fold one end of the dough on top of the other to form an envelope, then pass it through again. Repeat the step once more for 2 envelope-type folds. A big tip is to continuously flour your pasta sheets. The pasta dough can get a bit unmanageably sticky if left unfloured, so I don't like to take any chances. After the 2 initial envelope passes, turn the notch to level 1 and pass the pasta through. Remember to flour the dough if it looks a bit too slick, then repeat the process from level 1 to 6 on the pasta machine. By level 6, the dough should be quite thin, but still thick enough to confidently work with. If need be, you can run the pasta sheets through a level more than one time, but I've never needed to do that after notch 3 or 4. When you can see a clear silhouette of your hand through the pasta, you're good to go. Make sure the pasta sheets are properly dusted before folding them up and setting them on yet another floured surface, in this case a sheet tray. The hard work is done and the pasta is rolled out, but we still need to trim the sheets to size. To do so, I like to use the cooking vessel that I plan to use, which is none other than my trusty 9x13 cake pan. Simply lay the pan on a cutting board and trim up the sheets to fit the length of the pan. The sheets will grow a bit when they cook, but this is a good starting spot. In batches of 3 or 4, blanch the trimmed pasta sheets in heavily salted water for about 45 seconds, then transfer them to an ice bath to stop them from overcooking. We want the sheets to be al dente, and fresh pasta really doesn't take long to cook, so be mindful. Once the pasta is cooked and chilled down, lay them out over a well-oiled sheet tray and set them aside. Oil in between the sheets as well, or they could dry together. Finally, the moment of reckoning is upon us. But first, make sure to swipe some butter into that pan. Okay, so this is the station. I got my bolognese, my bechamel, my cheese all grated and ready to go, and my pasta sheets. Of course, my buttered 9x13. Now, all we have to do is build. Start by laying in a little bit of bechamel and ragu. This is going to ensure that our zaan doesn't stick to the bottom. Once that's in, grab a sheet of pasta and get to layering. I try not to overlap the pasta sheets because I like the way it looks, so I custom slice the sheets for a nice snug fit, but feel free to just lay the pasta over itself if that doesn't trigger your OCD. Spread a bit of bechamel, ragu, and a pinch of Parmesan cheese on each layer, then cover with pasta. Rinse and repeat until you either run out of all your ingredients or the zaan is just as tall as you'd like it to be. Up to you. I wouldn't worry too much about salt here. If you've cooked along with me, we've pretty much layered salt into each component of the lasagna. Not to mention the Parmesan is pretty salty, but if you're feeling it, you can totally add a pinch of salt every other layer or something like that if you want. Once at the tippy, I like to lay the final sheet so that it hangs over the edges of the pan. Why, you ask? Because I think it looks cool and the edges crisp up real nice like under the broiler. You'll see. One last time, pop on a bit of besh, ragu, and parm, then cover the whole deal, first with parchment, then tinfoil. The parchment stops the cheese from baking onto the foil. Then push the whole deal into a 400-degree Fahrenheit oven for 35 minutes. After 35 minutes, remove the zaan from the oven and take its shirt off. But we ain't done yet. Here I got me some low moisture mozzarella that I shredded up earlier. Just sprinkle some of that on top, then it's back in the oven, this time under the broiler until browned and crispy. There's really no specific time for this, but it does happen fast, so keep your head on a swivel and make sure that it does not burn. There she blows. I know it's tempting, but do not cut into this too early or it will fall apart on you. Wait at least 30 minutes before making the first incision. To cut the lasagna, I like to use a fish spatula to really get under there, and a knife. As the late great guru said, nobody's invincible, no plan is foolproof, we all must meet our moment of truth. This is mine. Alright, I mean, I'll take that. Looks fantastic. Get a load of those gorgeous layers. That's one attractive looking lagnazag. Can't forget the optional parsley shower, and let's see what she looks like on the inside. Nice. Cheers. Oh yeah. I remember liking but not like absolutely loving lasagna when I was a little kid until I was introduced to the Garfield comics. By then it was pretty much GG. Yeah, there's something about the way that orange cat waxed poetic about lasagna and just sort of the way it looked in the comic books that just sung to me. So whether or not you're serving this Big Daddy for a special occasion or a large gathering, or if you just want to take on a fun, interesting cooking project, I really hope that this video helped. And if it did, and if you're not already subbed, I urge you to consider subscribing. Plenty more videos like this if you're already a subscriber. And I will see you glorious pasta people next week. Ciao!